All right, class, this is your professor, Dr. Jace Austin, and today we are going to have a special unit. I am actually pre-recording this in December because with sad news, I have to let you all know that the place that I am currently in, which is a local record store near my hometown of Soul City, North Carolina. This record store is actually in Henderson, North Carolina. This place, Nits Music, which has been around since 1969, unless a buyer comes and takes over the store, this place will be closing before we start back in January. So I am actually here on Christmas Eve. I'm going to talk to the store owner and I'm going to do a little soapboxing myself. But one thing that I wanted to discuss in this module is just the idea of independent stores, especially in small towns, because when we talk about cultural heritage, one thing that we are talking about is the unique identity of communities. And if there is many things contribute to the unique identity of any particular small town. But part of that unique identity are the shops that exist in the small town, the locals who run them, and how those shops actually shape the identity of a particular small town. So first of all, one thing I'm going to do, and this is going to be a little awkward, don't get motion sickness on Dr. Jace, we're going to make it through this, but one thing that I am going to do is just kind of walk around the store a little bit. So as you can see, there are many album covers and posters behind me. These are things that are on the wall here in the shop, and these things, again, just kind of give this local record store its flavor. So again, I'm walking around. We've got Samela Mann behind me. She's a big favorite of my mother. As you can see, we've got some vinyl decorating the wall here. This type of independent record store, I believe, was more common in the past, but various things like chains like Best Buy at one point. I don't know if Best Buy is even still a major player at this point, but I remember 10, 15 years ago, Best Buy was eating into the local indie store revenues because you could get CDs from Best Buy for really cheap. But you can still get them for Amazon on cheap. People are using all these streaming options now. Dr. Jace is really old school, so I don't use these streaming options. I like the idea of actually owning my music. I like the quality of the music that I get on a CD as opposed to a streaming service. But again, we're walking around. As you can see here, again, sorry if you're getting motion sickness, but we've got some vinyl here. Vinyl is actually a hot ticket. In fact, I think that recently vinyl actually outsold compact disc for the first time in a long time. You'll see here we've got the Nits emblem here, Nits Music since 1969. My buddy Bill, he actually bought this business when the previous owners decided to retire, and I think he's had it for nearly 20 years, but not 20 years, maybe more like 15 years, somewhere in that area. But the original owners opened it back in the late 60s and ran it until the beginning parts of last decade. But again, and we've got CDs. I know that Bill also has cassette tapes. I know a lot of you aren't even familiar with some of these various forms of music media. So I came up during the CD era, and I know a lot of you, that was way before your time. The cassette era, that was when I was a really little kid. I still remember the cassette tapes and everything, but I don't think I ever bought any. And vinyl, which came out even before the cassette tapes, those were, these, you would always see, like, even in the 90s when I was growing up, you would still see DJs who were not using CDs. They were actually using vinyl. They would, do scratches and things with the records, make all kinds of different sound effects with them. So vinyl is something that a lot of people have nostalgia for, even more so than cassettes and CDs, because of the things that you could do with vinyl when you were actually hosting a party live. So we're going to walk around a little bit more just to show you a few other things. I apologize, it's going to be a little darker here, but you're still going to be able to see me. This local shop also sold books. They've got movies. And again, as you can see, decorations on the walls here. This is just something, I've never gone into like a Best Buy or for that matter, any music chain and seen this type of atmosphere. This is something that you would get from indie record shops. And again, back in the day, I believe there were more independent music and record shops, and every single one of them had their own unique identity, their own unique design. And they made the community, the local community, special. This is also actually Henderson, North Carolina, again, which is where I am and which is the closest town to the actual rural area that I'm from. Henderson also had a second sort of music shop, but they were doing some things they shouldn't have been doing and it wound up closing. So Nits has been pretty much the only game in town for a while. But what happened over the years, people started looking at other options. Again, they started streaming things on YouTube. They started doing things like Spotify. And, well, once all of that came into play, you know, it's very hard to compete with that. And then there were also some location issues, and we're going to talk to the owner in a few minutes, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. But it seems like there is also a little bit of a phenomenon here of people associating Nits with a previous location. And once that previous location was no longer viable for the store and the store moved, it seemed like the customer base also maybe started to dwindle at that time. But again, we're going to let the owner speak on that a little more. Okay, now I'm back in one of the corners of the store here, and one of the things that I do want to say is we're using Nits as an example. And again, there may not be any more Nits by the time we reconvene for school in January. Again, I'm recording this actually on Christmas Eve because I wanted to catch things, first of all, while I was still in North Carolina before I went back to Missouri. But also, I just wanted to, this is a neat store with a lot of neat history and a lot of meaning in the community. And so this was just the perfect opportunity for me to capture some of these things before things closed down. But music stores are not the only types of local stores that provide kind of a cultural heritage aspect to a local community. You actually hear a lot about restaurants, at least in the South where I'm from. I don't know if that's the same in the Midwest because I haven't been out there long enough, but definitely in the South, there were restaurants that I used to go to as a child that I believe are no longer here. There was a place in Warrenton, North Carolina called the Warren Restaurant. And it was your typical greasy spoon, but it was also somewhere where the waitresses knew customers by name. People had their different beliefs of what was the best thing to order there, and they would kind of stick to what they wanted. People would talk about high school sports out there, especially high school football. You wanted to get together and do that sort of thing. That's where you would do it. And you would also talk about your small town politics and things like that. Here in Henderson, I also remember there was a restaurant called the Dabney Drive Restaurant. And my dad and I, we actually used to clean buildings at night. And then this was back when I was a teenager and a preteen. Just to clean local buildings at night. That's how we would make some of our side money and everything. And then after we were done cleaning, we would go to the Dabney Drive Restaurant. The breakfast there was amazing. It used to be, at least, but I believe that place is also closed. And even before it closed, they had like a change of ownership. And with that change of ownership, I personally felt that the quality of food went down a little bit. So that's something that, you know, when you have changes of ownership in these, sometimes it doesn't work out for the best in some of these small town establishments. And certainly when the customers go away in a small town business, it's very hard to replace those customers. Henderson is not a place that is growing population-wise. So we talk a lot about urban sprawl and everything, and actually even just south of Henderson, North Carolina, in Granville County and in Franklin County, North Carolina, there's a little bit of, in maybe an urban sprawl, if you want to call it that. The Raleigh-Durham area is actually growing into Franklin County and growing into Granville County. But the population of Vance County, I believe, is actually still declining. Vance County being where Henderson, North Carolina is. One reason, I haven't actually looked at the data, but one reason I believe that the population is declining is because we have closed 2 schools in Vance County. One of the middle schools and one of the high schools in Vance County were closed because they were no longer needed, and I believe that that was attributed to, I believe that those closures were attributed to lower student enrollment. And I'm from the next county over, which is Warren County, and we actually had 2 high schools like way back in the day, and we've only had 1 high school, Warren County High School, for quite a while now. So when you have these types of communities, unless you are seeing growth through places becoming suburbs when the larger cities nearby start to sprawl into these rural counties, if you don't have that type of growth going on for you, then what tends to happen is a lot of times people leave for jobs. Unemployment is not as high, I don't think, as it used to be here in Vance County and in Warren County, but it's still a problem. And there are more jobs in the Raleigh-Durham area. And then also just education. A lot of times people will graduate from high school out here, and then they will move on to college. And it used to be, the idea used to be that you would go on to college, but then you would come back to your local community and you would use that knowledge and all of those experiences that you gained in college, you would bring that back to your local community and you would make your local community better. But I think that's a very old school way of thinking. People aren't so much doing that anymore. If you have somebody who grows up in this area and then they go to Raleigh or Durham or Chapel Hill for college or Greensboro, a lot of those people just remain in those cities because there is more to do once you leave. There are more jobs, there's more nightlife, all of that stuff. And so we are losing a lot of our promising people to these larger cities. And, you know, and I don't mean to talk bad or disparage the people who remain, but a lot of the people in my home county, I'm just being honest. This might be offensive, but I'm just being honest. A lot of the people who remain in my county of Warren who never left are people who don't show much initiative. That's just honestly what it is. And so we have, again, there's a lot of unemployment in Warren County. A lot of these people probably back in the old days would have just gotten a job at the tobacco mill or the textile mill or gotten agricultural jobs. But those things have also gone away. So Henderson actually we had textile mills and we had tobacco mills here in Henderson, and those have all gone. So those people who would have done those jobs, they are no longer able to do those jobs, and they're finding odd jobs here and there. Maybe they're working at the Walmart distribution center or something of that nature. But it's just not the same. And I would also say that those textile mills, for what it's worth, I've heard a lot of people in this community say that the textile mills used to actually look out for their employees in a particular way. And I don't think that the Walmart distribution center really has that same type of vested interest in their local employees and don't look out for them the same way. So again, these are the things that we compete with in small towns, and these are the things that I unfortunately feel lead to small towns losing some of their community, losing some of their identity. We just have all of these factors working against us. And so telling a little bit of the story of Nits Music, this is kind of a case study in how local businesses can create identity for small towns. And so we're going to talk to the owner here in a minute, and we are going to get his take on things and what the closure of this store, if it closes, means to the local community, and just even how we got there. And part of the reason I want to do this is because I want us to be a little more mindful of the history of the places that we drive through. You know, Henderson is something that it's a place that a lot of people just drive through. If they're on Interstate 85 and they are going from, I don't know, from New York or DC down to Atlanta, you will drive through Henderson, North Carolina, and it's a place that you drive through. And there's so many places like that also in the Midwest. This isn't just a Southern thing. There are drive-through communities in Iowa, in Missouri, in Kansas, in Nebraska, which is where most of my students, where most of you all are from. And just be mindful of all the history that you actually may be driving through as you are driving through one of these communities. It's somehow I think we're just losing it, and so I like to have this opportunity to just kind of archive it, kind of tell these stories, let people know what these communities used to mean, because we are becoming a more global society, and I don't know what the globalized society means in the long run. I don't know what it means for the specific American identity, and then I don't know what it means for identities of a lot of the small towns that make up this country that we live in. So I'm going to pause this here, and we are going to talk to the owner as we can. There will be a lot of pausing because this is Christmas Eve and he's doing a lot of business, so we will be pausing as he takes care of customers, but he has agreed to allow us to speak with him even on this very busy day. All right, everyone, so this is my buddy Bill Harris here. He is the owner of Nits, and you've been the owner since
2005.
Since 2005, so 15 years. I apologize for the 20-year statement that I said earlier, about 14 to 15 years. And during that time, he has seen this location, well, this business at a few locations, but he kept it going. There was a lot of resolve and resilience and a lot of passion in his desire to keep it going. And I think part of that is because Bill really does understand what a small town business that is not part of a chain actually offers to its community. So Bill, the first thing that I wanted to do was just ask you, what does Nits, what do you think it means to the identity of Henderson, North Carolina and the surrounding area?
Well, I don't know if it's just Nits. I mean, I think any small local business gives a unique flavor to a community. For here, it's maybe the local radio station. It's this place. It's the engraving shop across the street. It's not just a record store. It's any small local business that's not part of the chain. You can go to Target in Wake Forest, or you can go to Target in Salina, Kansas, or you can go to Target in Fort Lauderdale. You know what you're going to get. It's going to be the exact same thing. It's just cookie cutter, and it's all the same thing. There's no character to it. With a smaller business like this, if you go, unfortunately, I've had to go to work for a local furniture store full time. You go in there, and their policy is the same. They're strict corporate America. You have these rules to follow. You come into a smaller, locally owned business like this, the guy comes in and says, hey, look, man, can you cut me a break on this, or can you do this? You can get better service because I'm in a position where I can do things. I don't have to follow some corporate rule book that was produced somewhere else out of the corporate office. And I think it makes it for a much more customer-friendly atmosphere, for one. And once you do that, and people know that you know what you're doing, and they know that you're passionate about what you're doing, then you start to get more people come in and they want to stand around and talk. And I said, one of the things I love about this place is people come in and they want to argue about, who's the better rapper, Jay-Z or Eminem? Who's the better guitar player, Keith Richards or Mick Taylor? Or who's got the greatest album of all time? What was the greatest Beatles song of all time? Greatest Stevie Wonder album of all time? Whatever it happens to be. And you get people that come in and just want to talk about music. And you can't really go. Can you imagine going into Walmart and saying, "Hey, what's the greatest Eminem CD of all time?" That's the response you're going to get. And that's just what makes local businesses special.
And it's actually interesting that you brought that up. I do remember, for instance, well, first of all, okay, so again, I'm dating myself. Y'all already know this, but my favorite group of all
at least
time.
You're never without a date.
Thank you, Bill. Okay. My favorite musical group of all time, Bone Thugs and Harmony. Whenever Bone came out with something and Bill had it, Bill was able to let me know. So that again, he knew. And Bill actually, I went on ahead and bought the CD anyway because I was curious about it. But I remember buying a Blind Boys of Alabama CD from Bill one time, and Bill did warn me. He didn't just try to push the sale on me. He warned me. He said, "This isn't your style," and I was like, I do realize it's not, but the thing was I had seen the Blind Boys actually perform live, and so I did just want to, even though the CD didn't really capture that live performance because their live performance was just amazing, it was still a way for me to have ownership of that, like post-performance ownership, if that even makes sense, but I had something like that. So you really do kind of learn the musical interests of your repeat customers, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like you said, I mean, that's somewhere like Walmart or Target. If they have a music section anymore, I think they have a small one. They're not going to call up a customer and say, "Hey, look, the Rolling Stones just put out a new album. You're going to want to come by and get it because I know you like them." That's not going to happen. Here, I do that all the time for folks. I had a lady last week hunting for the new Blake Shelton, and I'd known since July she was interested in it. When it came out last week, I sent her a message on Facebook and said, "Hey, the Blake Shelton's in. You want to come by and pick that up?" And people appreciate that. And that's just not something you're going to get from a major chain retailer. It's just not going to happen. Because they can't. They can't. I mean, they're dealing with thousands and thousands of people every day, and it's a big corporate monster. So, I mean, that's just what you get.
And I would add to it, so I know, again, with the generation that I'm teaching here, I know some of you may be saying to yourselves, well, still Amazon has these users also like the thing. Is that I have come up with so many duds just trying to follow that model. So I had actually moved out of Henderson, and just for a little while, and by a little while I'm talking about just a few months, I was buying music on Amazon every now and then, but I came back to Bill. Bill has actually sold me some things remotely and just mailed them to me because he knows my music interests, and if I ask him about adjacent suggestions of music that I might like, if I like this particular artist, then he's got some ideas. And there are, I just don't think that those algorithms that are working for Amazon are quite as effective. Because they are basing things on previous customer habits, and these previous customers, bless them, but they don't know my ear. They haven't even communicated with me, whereas Bill has. So, by the way, and there's going to be some stopping and starting as customers go in. So if you have the little breaks and everything going on, that's the reason why. But I do want to also say, I wish I could have recorded the experience we just had. I did not have the customers' permission to record, so I didn't, but just a great exchange. This woman that I had never a woman that I had never met before, but she came in, she bought some music, and then she was also informed that the store will be closing this Saturday, and she and I talked for probably 3 or 4 minutes about just Nits and missing it, because that's what these small town stores actually mean to the community. And so again, I wish I could have recorded that exchange, but I wasn't going to ask her for her permission. It's just kind of a weird thing to do with a stranger. I used to work in news. I don't do it anymore, so now I've been spared having to do that sort of thing. But I've had those experiences since I've been home to North Carolina this December. I came in here on a previous day, and I actually spent a few hours in here, which is something I'm used to doing. And yes, several customers, they were being informed at that time that the store was closing. And, again, these are strangers, but people in my same community. And I had a little bit of a discussion with them, impromptu. And, you can just tell that for those who have been loyal customers of this business, this means a lot to them. And the fact that it's closing is not a happy thought. But we're going to get back on track talking to Bill here. Now that we've spoken just about what this means to the community, I would like just a little bit of history. What I'm going to do, I can actually get the Daily Dispatch archive on some of the Missouri databases. So I'm going to do that and get some of the backstory from the previous owners. But if you could tell us just a little bit of how things have gone since you took over in 2005, how things started out, and what brought us here today.
Okay. So the store opened in 1969 in a community named Oxford, which is about 10 miles down the road. It was started by a lady named Cheryl Brown Hawkins, who recently passed away. Did you know this? So she passed away about 2 weeks ago. She and her later husband, Philip Hawkins, ran the store forever. We used to have a shopping mall here called the Henderson Mall District, basically, typical shopping mall. And they stayed there for years and years and years, and everybody knew they were in the mall. And it was kind of one of the go-to spots in the mall. As the changes began at the mall due to lack of maintenance and increases in rent, they moved. And they moved to another store just up the road. And then they moved again, not too far from where we are right now, just across the street. And it was at that point they decided, we've had it for 35 years or whatever it was. We want to pull back, and they were getting up in years. And so I came in one day. You have to understand, I've been a customer of this store since 1977. So I knew all the people in it very well. And I came in one day to complain that they were closing, much like my customers are doing to me now. And Cheryl pulled me aside and said, look, why don't you buy the place? You need music, you know how to talk to people. And I said, you're crazy. How much do you want for it? And we went on from there. So we started out just across the street here. Business was fantastic. Friday afternoon, $1,500 was pretty much regular stuff. It was great.
Okay.
And then BB&T, otherwise known as Bad Banking and Trust, decided to buy the building.
And by the way, they're not out in the Midwest, so there's no attachment from
Right.
anyone. All right.
So BB&T Bank decided to buy the building, and which they did. They bought the building, tore it down, and built their own new state-of-the-art facility, which meant all the businesses that were located in the building that I was in had to go. So we moved a block off the main road. Just about everyone that was in that building moved, including us. Our rent went up and our sales went down because we no longer had the visibility that we did when we were on the main street of the previous building. At that point, I had to make a decision then, and this was in 2006, about what to do because we weren't making the money that we were making, but yet our expenses remained the same. Because at this point, we decided to pack up and move the store 20 miles south to my hometown of Lewisburg in Franklin County. Partly due to business reasons, partly because I had an aunt who I was very close to, and I was her only relative that was close by, who was in poor health, and she asked me to move it too so I could be close to her. She passed away in 2007, and after she passed away, we moved back to our current location. We got dirt cheap rent right across the parking lot from one of our previous locations. Everybody found us, and everything basically went back to normal. Still didn't have the sales that we did from our first location, but we were surviving, paying the bills, had a little money left over at the end of the month to pay myself, and on we went. And we kept on doing that, but as time went along, that evil cell phone popped up, and it really became noticeable in the last couple of years just how much downloading and streaming, despite the return of vinyl, and I want to touch on something you said earlier.
Okay.
Despite the fact that vinyl's made a comeback, it's just not enough to support just a record store. If I had perhaps some performance space and bands coming in, I could bring in more traffic and other sources of revenue, you could keep it going. I never wanted to do that. I just wanted to run a record store. But as it is, just a regular record store is just, particularly in a small town like Henderson, is not particularly a viable business option. I wish there was some way it could continue, and I hope that someone will pop up in the next few days and say, "Hey, look, I want to buy it. I've got an idea." And I think someone with the right vision can still make a place like this work. I just don't have the finances to do it anymore. So that's that. That's pretty much the history of it. I mean, it's kind of been a one-man family, mom and pop operation ever since it was begun, and mom and pop operations are slowly disappearing under the weight of Amazon. And two things. One, Amazon. I get it. If you live in some rural area and you want to buy, say, I don't know, like he needs cymbals, he needs drum things, he needs musical instrument stuff. This is my son Alex, by the way. He needs drum stuff. I need guitar things that I cannot find local without getting in the car and driving 40 miles to Raleigh. And I don't want to do that. So Amazon provides a service. I'm not going to fault them for that. You know, it's great for people in rural areas who need things and that they might have to make a 2-hour trip to get, and may not have a way to do that, particularly if they're housebound. So I mean, Amazon provides a service for that, and it would be in a perfect world. There would be a way that they could mutually coexist. Little local mom and pop stores and big Amazon. So I get that Amazon provides a service, but it's being done at the expense of small businesses. Walmart's the same way. And you made a comment about vinyl outpacing CD sales. It's not quite what it seems on the surface.
Okay.
The reason for that is that if you go buy, say I've got an Eagles Hotel California record over. It's $24.98. If you bought the CD, $10, $11. So while sales figures are higher for LPs now, the number of units sold are not quite there.
Gotcha.
Because I mean you get 2 CDs for the price of an LP, which is that's another issue. So the overpricing of vinyl in today's marketplace. That's a whole other issue that really doesn't speak to what you're talking about.
Okay. But you see the knowledge and the passion for music there. That's something that, like, I just clicked the link and read about vinyl outpacing CDs as far as sales. But as you can see, somebody who knows music actually has more than just the superficial understanding of that I do. All right, so another thing that I want to talk to Bill about really quick, because also when I talk about cultural heritage in this course, one thing that keeps cultural heritage alive is oral tradition, and oral tradition is also born from just having meeting spaces, having the ability to talk to other people in your community. And so what I will say is when you're in a rural area like where Henderson itself is a town. It's a town of, I don't know, maybe
15,000, 16,000.
15 to 16,000. But it's also the largest town in like this entire 4-county area. Like Henderson is nestled in Vance County, and then there's Granville County, Warren, and Franklin that border Vance. And those counties that border Vance do not have a 15,000 person town. Like the biggest town in my home county of Warren is Norlina, which is only about 2,000 people. So
Warrenton's actually bigger than Warren.
Oh, okay. All right. So Warrenton, and Warrenton is only about 2,000 as well, right?
Yeah, and they've maintained that population since about 1850.
So there you have it. So when we talk about quote going to town in a place like Warren County, we're talking about going to Henderson because the 15,000 population town is actually the biggest game in town. This is where there's not even a Walmart in Warren County, which I don't complain about. So I have to, if I needed to go to Walmart for something, I would come here. But when I think about meeting space, there are not a lot of places to actually meet people. You have the restaurants. That's probably the go-to. People will meet at a restaurant and they'll, talk, shoot the breeze. Thank you, sir.
I'm trying to get you out of there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what we do in small towns. We help each other out in that way. So, restaurants are a place that you can go, but outside of restaurants, there aren't a whole lot of other options. You do have parks. In Warren County, people will actually just kind of sit outside or just go to like even car washes. When I was a teenager, Friday and Saturday night, you'd see guys at car washes and that's where we would be hanging out. But those are our options.
Churches too.
Churches, yes, thank you. So churches are another avenue for, meeting people and having discussions. And churches are, churches for a lot of retirees, especially in the South, are not just Sunday events. Like a lot of retirees, they'll be at the church throughout the week. So yeah, the church is another avenue there. But Nits is the type of store where I've met quite a few people. I didn't really stay in touch with a lot of people that I met, but it was just so easy to just strike up a conversation, even with a complete stranger in this shop. And I've done it many, many times over the years. So I would like for Bill to speak to that. How does a place like Nits kind of build bridges, especially, and I do also want to say this just for the record, Henderson is actually, well, maybe not inner city Henderson, but Vance County itself is also kind of balanced racially. I don't know the exact demographics, but
60-40.
60-40, so I think it's 60-40 black-white, correct?
Correct.
And we also do have a Mexican-American population,
A
growing Mexican-American population in this county as well. So this is also a place because, and I hate to say it, but here in the South, a lot of the churches are actually still pretty segregated. So we do have the black churches and the white churches. So even though you may have retirees or other people who are at the church throughout the week, that there's not a lot of interracial conversation going on at the churches that I know of, except at special occasions. But when it comes to Nits, I talk to black people here, I talk to white people here, and, just whoever's coming in. So if I can get Bill to elaborate maybe a little more on that, how does this bring people together? What types of conversations happen here?
Well, first of all, music is a universal language.
Okay.
I mean, I had a guy come in today. He was looking for Johnny Taylor. Do you know who Johnny Taylor is?
Not exactly.
It's pretty bad. He's before your time, Jason. It's all right.
Okay.
He's almost before mine.
Okay.
Johnny Taylor, 60s R&B soul singer, Stax Records, that crowd. With Otis Redding, Anna Thomas, people like that.
No, I do know Otis. I love Otis.
Okay, so he's from that era.
Okay.
So he wanted Johnny Taylor, he wanted Otis, he wanted Sam Cooke, and he wanted Motorhead. Motorhead is a British 70s heavy metal band.
It's quite a combination.
But that's what I'm saying. Music is a universal language.
Yes.
So we'll have people coming in here and they'll get perfect example. Chris Stapleton. When he first hit a few years ago, I didn't have any of my white country folks with me. And were fans of country music. Chris who? They didn't know. It was elderly black women. They wanted them some Chris Stapleton. They liked Chris Stapleton. They wanted to hear about Tennessee whiskey. And that was where he started. So, and then finally everybody else kind of caught on to what they were hearing. And everybody started coming with Chris Stapleton. So, it's a universal. It's a universal language. Everybody comes in here for one reason. They're here to buy music. And so if you walk in and somebody else walks in, you're here to get some music. They're here to get some music. So it makes it easy to say, talk about what you buy. Oh, you like that? Is that any good? No, it's not. Well, you like that one better? Okay. And all of a sudden we're talking about music. And I think that helps break down barriers. Because a lot of people, like I say, they get everything. They're not. I mean, there are certain people that they want R&B and they want Southern soul and they want whatever, and that's their thing and that's what they're going to stick with. Or they want country music or whatever that's doing. And that's fine. But there's also a lot of people who are just all over with their music tastes, and I think all of that helps people to get to know one another and have a conversation. But we don't stop at music around here, never have. As you can well attest to, Jason, we talk about everything in here. And I mean, you kind of have to be careful with, some people that you may or may not be able to talk politics with. And if you kind of know, you get to know people and I better not say anything about Donald Trump, that'd get me in trouble. Or I better not say anything about, what's happening with homelessness or whatever, because people are going to get worked up. But there are a lot of customers that come in here. But I know I can say, hey, well, what do you think about that bill in Congress? And we'll start a discussion about it for whatever. We also talk a lot of sports. You come in here, we talk about that sorry team we got down in Charlotte on occasion.
It's my Carolina Panthers emblem that use.
Yeah. You may want to cover that up, considering how bad they are. But, we talk about a lot of things. All I really need is a beer tap.
Okay.
It really is kind of like that without the beer tap. Because, you go into a bar and you sit and you talk to people about whatever's going on in the world and issues that they may be concerned with. And, that goes on in here too, except we just don't have a beer. Maybe I should have them. I might make more money. I could stay up and add the beer tap. But I mean, that is kind of the same thing. People come in, they want to talk, and sometimes you get more than you really bargained for. Yeah, I mean, but that's retail in general. That's just retail in general. People just come in and they tell you their life story, whether you want it or not. You're going to get it. If you've ever seen, the High Fidelity movie with John Cusack? It came out about 2000.
I'm not saying.
Oh my God, it's so true. I mean, that's about a guy who runs a record store in New York City.
Okay.
And it's also about his love life, but that's irrelevant. The record store part is just the way that whole movie is set up. You want to see what I do every day? Watch that movie.
Okay.
It's perfect.
And another thing that I've actually spoken to you about in here that I would imagine you've spoken to other customers. So here in the small town South, and both Bill and I do have roots in this area. So even though I'm black and he's white, but we had
a cousins somewhere along the way.
Exactly, and there's a shared story there. And one thing that Bill talks about that I think can also break down some barriers. I know you talk about it with me. I don't know if you talk about genealogy and local genealogy with
all
other
the time.
people.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
All the time.
Yeah.
I mean, because if how do I explain this in a short? I don't want to ramble about this because I can go off on a tangent here. So Jason's family are Alstons. Alstons have been in Warren County since day one, just about. Alstons are one of the oldest families in Warren County. Why there are so many Alstons is because the White Alston family were some of the largest slave owners in that county. Massive plantations, lots of land, lots of money, and because of that, they had lots of slaves. Now, as we all know, some of those slave owners weren't exactly picky on who they chose to hang out with and fool around with. And somewhere on your line there, there's a white folk in the woodpile.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, Ancestry DNA agrees with you.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even need the ancestry to tell me that. But I have a great grandmother who was an Alston.
Okay.
I've got her picture hanging on my wall, and she came from the same family that probably owned your ancestors.
Okay.
And so, therefore, you and I, of course, probably 7, 8 cousins. Half cousins probably, several times removed. But I mean, obviously from your good looks, you obviously got it from me. But yeah, I mean, and I talk about all this stuff. I'm the chairman of the Franklin County Historic Preservation Commission, and I'm all wrapped up into all that. And it's fun, it's fascinating, and news agencies like to make this big deal about all the racial stuff that goes on, and I'm sure there is some of it. I mean, there's obviously some of it. But, I talk to people every day from all walks of life, all income brackets, and I don't think in the 15 years that I've run the store, I've ever had one incident where another customer was called a racist, or I was called a racist. Everybody gets along. I mean, we just do. I mean, I think some of it in the media is slightly overblown because, I mean, look, let's face it, Fox, CNN, all these news outlets. What is their?
No, they're for profit.
They are for profit. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yes.
So if you can stir up racial tensions and get people to watch your program, more ad money. They don't really know what goes on in these small rural communities. It's all stirred up. I mean, one of the reasons we have it all stirred up down here, like the Silent Sand and all that other stuff, is because people move from where? Up north. They don't understand how the South works. They don't understand how people get along and how they do things. They don't have a clue. They come down here and go, oh, well, that's just wrong. We've got to do something about it. Well, no one cared until you showed up. Not to get on too high a horse about that. But, I mean, for the most part, down here, those folks just get along. We get along. We don't have a whole lot of trouble with that. You get into the bigger cities, and that's when you find trouble. But rural, North Carolina, like where we're in now, most people get along just fine. Mm-hmm. I have seen very little problem at all, and I hope it stays that way.
And and that's something that I would also just kind of also like to just play on a little bit. So I've actually I've lived in Now, this is the only real small town area that I've lived in, but I've known people, I've lived throughout the Carolinas, and I've met people from small towns all throughout North Carolina and South Carolina, either through college or through my work or whatever. And then also now that I'm in the profession and I go to these conferences, I do meet people who are from racially mixed towns throughout the South. I think that in small towns, just and if you don't take offense to this, you can actually look these demographics up so that you know I'm not making this up. But the small towns in the Southeast, I think in part due to the past of slavery and things like that, they do tend to have more racial admixture than the small towns, again, in the Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa area. And that's not meant to be offensive to anyone who is from those areas, but I think that maybe if you are from one of the small towns in the Midwest, and I don't know, and this is something you can leave in the comment section because we do have a discussion thread related to this week's module. But I do think that outsiders kind of misunderstand the racial dynamics of the small town South and these racially mixed towns in the small town South, and not even in the Carolinas, which is really more outer South. Also, even in the deep South, I've met people who are from small town Alabama. I've got a buddy who's from Meridian, Mississippi, which is a racially mixed town in Mississippi, and even in the deep South along the Gulf Coast. Those aspects of life, we get along better than people seem to realize. And I'm trying to think of something that can actually, I hate to use this as the example, but the closest thing that I can think of that you all might be familiar with, I do think that maybe there's a little bit of hyperbole, but if you've seen that old show In the Heat of the Night, first of all, if you haven't seen it, it's a great show. I love it, so check it out. And they do talk about racial tensions in the heat of the night, but they do kind of, I don't know, they also show that, we have the differences and we talk about them, we still get along and we make life work in our small towns here in the South. And that's just how we do. But even with the complicated past that we have, again, my past and Bill's past, well, not our individual past, but our family legacies, they probably intertwine. But it's okay. We can cope with that. We can deal with that. And we have been for decades. And yet there's, yes, there is that element. I'll tell you just really quickly before I ask Bill the next question. But my father was actually in school when the Franklin County schools integrated. And I asked my dad, okay, what kinds of tensions and everything did you have? And my dad told me there was really no conflict because, yeah, they had gone to separate schools, but after school, a lot of these black kids and white kids actually did maybe not sharecropping, but they did agricultural work and kind of knew each other through that. And so they were kind of familiar with each other already when the schools integrated. So it wasn't like the, you hear what you see in the history classes is true, where there was like Little Rock, for example, where you did have the big mess, but also Little Rock isn't really my idea of a small town or a rural area. And when you do think of rural areas here in the Carolinas, they weren't always, the integration wasn't always as bloodied and as difficult as it's portrayed when you look at the bigger case studies like the Little Rocks. So that's something else to kind of keep in mind there. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to ask Bill here is, I know what Henderson with Nits looks like. In fact, I was born in 1983, so Nits has always been here during my lifetime. But I'm looking now at the post Nits Henderson, what it's going to look like, what people are going to do to get their music, and will people be able to will people be able to have the same really informed experiences, and if so, how? So I am going to ask Bill, if Nits does close, what does that look like? How does this community then go about learning about new music and, sharing musical experiences? And you've even had independent, maybe I shouldn't say independent, I don't know what the proper term is, but artists who have not been discovered yet who are local, whether they're rappers or gospel singers or whoever, and even they have had their music sold out of this shop.
Sure.
What are their options now?
I'm not sure that they've got any, at least on a local level. I mean, yeah, I mean, like my son, he does music on his own, you know, and your options are, what are your options? When you want to, no, when you do music, what are your options? What do you do to get your music out?
Oh, YouTube,
YouTube, thank you.
Spotify,
Spotify,
um, Bandcamp,
Bandcamp,
um, iTunes.
iTunes.
I thought they did away with iTunes. I'm sorry. Okay.
Apple Music, same thing.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
cool.
So,
All
I
right.
mean, that's what he does. I mean, he's not, and I think this is true for a lot of younger artists who are just beginning out in their musical journey.
Mhm.
It's expensive to produce CDs and vinyl. It's not cheap. You have to have a minimum run of CDs in order for anybody to even bother pressing them. Unless you're going to make it on your computer and press them up. You can do that all day long. But that's what he does. I think that's what a lot of young musicians do, and that's how people are going to find it. But you also have to be able to promote yourself in a way that people will discover it. One of the things, if I had seen how the changes were going to come 10 years ago, what I would have done was take down my back wall, put in a performance space, and build this almost like entertainment complex where people could come in and sit, and we'd have food and beverages, and I would have other revenue streams other than just a record store. And I wasn't smart enough to quite figure that one out.
Well, it's hard to do that.
Yeah, it really was. So for people, I mean, YouTube is probably where most people, I think, find music right now. I think more people use YouTube, at least around here, than anywhere. More so than Spotify, and more so than anything else.
What I will say though is word of mouth also.
Word of mouth helps.
And this is a place for word of mouth. I don't know
Yeah.
how else you get the word of mouth
Yeah.
sometimes in a small town. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's really not that many things you can do. I mean, we talked about Amazon with their ways to say, oh, you might like this because you bought that. All that's well and fine, but then again, Amazon doesn't really know what you've got in your record collection.
Right.
They don't know that, and so they may send you stuff you've already got. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they find out. I mean, there's the thing is you can go to Amazon or you can go to Walmart.com or one of these other places, and you can do targeted shopping. Hey, I want the brand new Paul McCartney CD. Okay, well, you just go there and get it. There it is. It's targeted shopping. But the whole browsing aspect is what you lose by not having a record store. It's hard to browse on Walmart.com or Amazon.com. It's not. There's just not the same thing of flipping through records or CDs and going, oh wow, look at this. This is great. And maybe you find some obscure local band from the region or whatever that doesn't exist anymore, and they never had any music digitized or put on CD. That happens all the time. So I don't know how they're going to find it. I can't see someone, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I can't see someone just coming in and starting a new record store without the history of this place behind it. This place has got a history. Someone wanted to buy it. They've got that history they can lean on. So it's something that everyone in this region knows. They know the name. They know the checkerboard sign. They know it's Nits. That's why I didn't change the name when I bought it.
Yeah, there was no need. Yeah,
There was no
so
need.
branding is there.
Yeah. So I don't know how that's gonna work. I really hope someone will buy it and take it on. But at this point, it's Tuesday, Christmas Eve. Our last day is Saturday, and so far, we'll see.
And reflect on some of the things that Bill just spoke about there, because in your core classes you did talk about information-seeking behavior and browsing. That concept of browsing, that's a relevant concept to library and information science, and so is the information-seeking aspect. Information-seeking, when you are trying to find information on artists, and when you are trying to find other artists or other music that you may like, it's much easier when you have a guy like Bill who's knowledgeable and passionate about the subject about the subject area. And that type of information seeking is going, like for me personally, and I know for a lot of other people in this community, it will be thwarted when we are in a situation where we are having to look at the magazines and having to just hope that the artists that we like are still putting out album after album that we are going to like. And I know for a fact that that's not always the case. I have a lot of artists have put out, their experimental albums, and they've been good or they've been bad. I bought here actually one of Kanye West's his more experimental albums. It was like this 808 and Heartbreak album, and I'm like, hey, I like some of the old Kanye, so yeah, let me check out this Kanye, and that album I thought was terrible. But some people liked it, but again, it was a matter of, I didn't ask Bill, actually. Maybe I should have asked Bill, what are other people saying about this album, or what do you think about it? What's the feedback? But instead, I just said, hey, I like Kanye West's previous work. I'm going to take a chance on his experimental album. And I listened to it twice, and I don't even know where it is now. But
that's Kanye, so don't go there.
So yeah, that is what happens. That's just what happens here. And as as Bill's son mentioned, this is in order to get your word out, you have to have resources like, you have to rely on things like YouTube now, or Spotify, or iTunes, which apparently still exists. But I had shied away from iTunes because I heard that iTunes kind of rips off the artists, which I guess
they all do.
Yeah, I guess they all do.
I mean, think about it. Spotify. I get this in my music, in my feed on Facebook a lot. Spotify will put up a sponsored post saying, all of your favorite hits, 3 months for free. Okay, where's the business model to be free?
Right.
And where are the artists? I mean, artists make a lot more money if I sell a physical product. They get a bigger cut. And they have to have millions of streams. You ever wonder why ticket prices are so high? Did you say your dad went to see the Stones on their last tour? What did he pay to see Rolling Stones?
I can't remember, but it was up there.
$400 or $500?
It was close to $500.
Yeah. Why? Because they're trying to make up the income from their lost sales of vinyl and CDs. They don't have that anymore. So they make it up by merchandising. They make it up in ticket sales. And that's how they do it. Because they're used to a lifestyle.
Right.
And they want to keep that money rolling in. And so to make up for the lost CD sales, up go the ticket prices. I mean, I think some of it's just a natural increase anyway, but not as much. I mean, I remember in 1989 seeing the Stones in Raleigh on their Steel Wheels tour, and I bought a Scout ticket for $150 for the 11th row. Okay. And everybody was like, oh my God, $150 for a concert ticket? You must be out of your mind. I didn't think anything about it. But now $150 might get me in the parking lot. I don't go to concerts anymore. I can't afford it. But I understand why ticket prices are so high, because they're trying to make up for the lost revenue. I mean, they're not getting any money out of the streams. This is why Taylor Swift held back for years putting her stuff out on Spotify and iTunes and all this other stuff, because she wasn't getting any money from it. Kid Rock did the same thing. I think Kid Rock was also one that did that for a while. But the downside is because when a lot of the younger folks who want to stream and have it on their phone, they don't see it, out of sight, out of mind, and don't do it. Because they're not going to go buy the CD because they have no way to play it. No CDs in the car anymore.
Right.
That sort of thing. So.
And that's something else I want to talk about. So when you're touching on that, other things that I want to talk about related to the music, and you mentioned this on your on the store's Facebook page.
Yeah.
There's one thing that I kind of want you all to keep in mind is that when you're streaming this music, you don't really have ownership of it. So when I buy a CD, I bought the rights to have that CD. I can play that CD wherever. If I lose my internet connection, as long as I still have my 5-disc player that I have had since 2001, as long as I have that old thing and it's still working, and that thing is still working, I have that ownership of the music. It never goes anywhere. I also can appreciate and this is a generational thing. I know I've got some older students too because this is a master's program, and I do. I'm going to let Bill, because Bill will know better than me on this, but in my opinion, there seems to even be a difference in how older people like myself view an album as opposed to the younger folks, the folks that are still in their 20s. I love an album. I love listening to an artist and the concepts of that artist and the production from that artist team of producers. I love that from beginning to end in a 45 to even a, I have some albums that are 70 minutes long and I'll still listen to the whole thing. And I think I see a culture emerging with younger people where they are more concentrated on singles and maybe making mixtapes, which mixtapes were around when I was young, don't get me wrong, but we were still buying albums and appreciating an album from beginning to end. And I know it happens with the younger generation, but I don't know that it's quite the same. Bill, would you speak to that?
Okay. If you go back and look, say, from the era of 1955 to about 1964, 63, 64, 65, basically you had a singles mentality. Albums meant nothing. They meant nothing. They were just, you got an album, it had the hit single, maybe 2 hit singles, and a bunch of filler. There was just nothing to it. Nobody thought about an album as being anything important. It was that little bit of plastic.
Okay.
That 45 right there. We had 2 songs on it. We had the hit and the other side because we were all attuned to AM radio. Everybody listened to AM radio. And you only got the singles on the radio. So that's what they heard. So the album was irrelevant. And then all of a sudden it changed in the early 60s as the culture began to change. When artists, Beatles, Stones, Bob Dylan in particular, came along and said, you know what? We're going to make an artistic statement. We're going to say more on the album. We can say more. We're going to say more. And we're going to make every song. The Beatles did this. That every song was important. Every song could be a single. And once that began to take shape, we began to see the culture start to swing over just a little bit to albums starting to realize that artists can make an entire artistic statement within that 45 or 50 minutes of vinyl instead of 2.5 minutes. All of a sudden, you had Bob Dylan writing all these songs like a Rolling Stone, songs about Medgar Evers, all these things, Emmett Till, and all these important socially conscious things that weren't said before. And all of a sudden, people started to realize there's more to this than 2.5 minutes on that 45. And so it began to change it. And then the 60s exploded in 65, 66, and 67. Things like Sgt. Pepper came along and completely changed the whole view of it. We were starting to get away from AM radio. FM stations were coming along. They were playing entire albums. They were playing album sides. They were playing things that weren't necessarily the top 40 hit on AM radio. And therefore, it brought the vinyl LP to its apex probably by 72, 73, 74. Right on up until the advent of CDs. And when CDs took over, you still had people buying the entire thing. And then all of a sudden, something weird happened. Napster showed up. You could rip that CD, you could rip individual songs, and share those individual songs. And that's kind of where the beginning of what we have now with Spotify and streaming and all this other stuff has gotten to. So now it's kind of swung back the other way to where the album is not really that important anymore. It's that 2.5, 3 minutes that you get now. And that's what it's back to a song culture instead of an album culture. Whether we'll ever go back to an album culture, I don't know. I don't know if there'll be artists like there were in the 60s and 70s that can make that cultural change. There's never going to be another Beatles or another Jimi Hendrix to come along and completely just set the music world on its head. It's just music is too splintered. One of the nice things that does happen is nowadays anybody, whether you've got any talent or not, can now make a record in their bedroom. Me and my son do this all the time. We make music all the time. Everybody can do it. The technology is there. And that's great for people who don't have the ability to walk up to a local record producer and ask for a record contract with Sony or Universal, whoever. However, at the same time, it provides a glut of material in the marketplace in no way to sort of weed through it and find the good stuff. It's all out there. And I don't necessarily know that that's a great thing. Anybody can put their song up on YouTube. And it's just all this stuff out there to have to read through. That's another thing where I think a good record store comes in handy because you can get that's trash, it's garbage. You don't. It's got one song on it, and then the rest of it's trash. You're not going to get that in the records. Yeah, sure, you can go on YouTube and follow some guy's blog about it, but it's not the same thing as being able to ask a question.
Right.
So that's kind of where we are with that.
And you've done the opposite with me, too. I just wanted to mention that because I found it interesting when you said, don't bother with that. Bill is the only person on earth who would have been able to convince me to buy a Justin Bieber CD. But there was one particular Justin Bieber CD that was actually, and I think the R&B singer Usher actually wrote quite a few of the songs on that CD.
He produced it, too.
Okay, yeah, so there you go. So, and I have a flavor for Usher already. And so Bill was actually able to tell me, hey, some people with similar music interests to you actually really enjoy this Justin Bieber CD. You may want to check it out. And at first I was like, oh, God, Bill has lost it. But I bought that CD anyway, and I have, I enjoy it. I never thought I would have bought a Justin Bieber CD ever in my life, but that CD is actually still in my car. My car is in Missouri now. I just parked it at the airport, but that CD is still in my car, and when I have to take trips from Kansas City to Columbia for work, sometimes Justin Bieber is what I listen to on the way there. It's just the thing. It's just that one album, but it's actually in the rotation. And Bill, you've also told me that the files for Spotify aren't necessarily as high quality, right?
No, I mean none of that stuff is, because in order to get it to go back and forth across the internet, it's got to be compressed. And when it gets compressed, you lose all the high end and the bottom end, and you get a bunch of mid-range. A lot of CDs are produced like that too. I mean, CDs should scientifically sound better than vinyl, but oftentimes they don't because of compression issues. Because they use compression to make them louder. You can't do that with vinyl. Because if we do it with vinyl, it's going to make the needle pop out and through. Too much volume will make you do that. So you get all this compression going on.
And I actually have some say into that, because I do put music on Spotify and stuff. When you send it to them, you send it as a high quality file.
And then they compress it.
Yeah, they compress it.
Okay.
There are some services that do keep it at high quality. Tidal does that. Bandcamp does that. They do have options, though.
That's not surprising. Tidal would do that since that's Jay-Z's service. Jay-Z's a musician who probably has a little concern about quality.
And Spotify does have a high quality option, but I don't know how much that is. And YouTube's just awful.
So I mean, so that's a definite concern. But once again, you've got kids listening to music on a cell phone with a pair of earbuds. They don't care. They don't care. They're not going to care because they're not going to get that full stereophonic experience like if they had an old school CD player or a record player and a receiver and a couple of good speakers. They don't know what they're missing. They don't have a clue what they're missing. All the wonders that are buried away in a mix somewhere, because it's just all compressed down into one little pile, and there it is. This blob of god awful racket that has no. It's just
no dynamic.
It has no dynamic range whatsoever. If you ever, and it's made so quiet parts of the song are just as loud as the loud parts of the song, so there's no dynamic range. This is done a lot in radio stations. If you go to a radio station, you'll have a needle on a VU meter that registers the final output after going through all the audio processing that radio stations have. And that needle will sit there and just do this. It'll just wait. But if it's not compressed, then that needle will do this. It'll swing. And that's where you can hear all that dynamic.
Awesome. Well, I think I touched on everything that I wanted to touch on. I always
support your local record store.
Support your local record store and local businesses
Yes.
that do good work. And I would also say if you have the ability to resist or help a local business resist any sort of takeover or buyout, just for the sake of the identity of the community. If you are a cultural heritage minded person, maybe keep that in mind as well. Now, I have a news background, so I always, when I worked in news, I would always give people the opportunity to, because I don't think of everything as the interviewer. So I always ask the interviewee, is there anything that I left out, anything that you want to just take the time down to, anything that you want to mention that we haven't covered?
And we kind of touched on this some. You know, if you don't have local businesses, you don't have anything with a local flavor, you're left with Walmart. And you got to think about all these little local businesses employ people, and that money turns over in the community. If you go to Walmart, yeah, okay, they've got employees, that's great. And that does come back to the community. But Walmart's profits, they're going to Arkansas. They're not staying in little rural Vance County. Whereas the mom and pop shop up the street selling ice cream cones, that money is going to turn back over to the county. They're going to pay that girl who comes in after school to make ice cream, that part-time person. And all the stuff they're going to buy is local, and they're going to source it local, and all that money just keeps flowing around the community. And once we lose all that, once we all just become Amazon and Walmart, I mean, what do we have? We don't have anything. And where are people going to work? You know, if you're a community like Henderson in Vance County that doesn't have a whole lot going for it at the moment, you know, because all the textiles left, all the tobacco left, all that's gone. And you take away all the little local businesses that are floating around here. Not everyone's going to be able to work at Walmart and McDonald's. You know, you're just not going to have much in the way of the community. We're already to the point now where people don't have discussions. Because not face-to-face discussions because they're too busy doing that. And I think we lose something by not having that. A quick example I'll give you. This guy here, he's been running the store for me for the last month. He's never been one he's been sort of socially awkward around new people and new experiences. Doesn't really like to talk to a lot of strange people. By being in here the last month, he's blossomed into this, you know, he's like, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah. I mean, it's been so good for him because he's had to have contact and speak with people and talk to people. And it's really helped his personality. You know. He's always had a great personality, but he's a lot more, what's the word? Social. And than he ever has been because he's been forced to have a face-to-face conversation with people. If we just go all online, we have no personal interaction with anyone. We don't know how to talk to people. If we knew how to talk to people, and obviously if you look at some of the political posts on Facebook, we obviously do not know how to have a discussion with people in a common sense way. Right. You know, we're losing that by just because of I mean, I get all this stuff is important. I get that it's not going away, but it has its place, just like a place like this has its place or should. So, I mean, that's important too. We've just lost the ability to communicate because we're all too busy being online, ranting and raving about whatever it is that's made us angry.
Yes.
And I get that. I get that it's a way for people to voice their concerns about the world, but I think we get a lot further, a lot farther, a lot quicker if we would just do it face to face and have a little human interaction. And local places provide that opportunity to have human interaction with other people from the same area with the same concerns.
Absolutely. And I do want to that was something that I actually meant to speak about that I neglected to speak about, so I'm glad that Bill brought this up. One other reason why these small town businesses are so important is because, yes, they provide employment opportunities and keep money in the small town area. And honestly, when Best Buy was selling CDs, they don't do it as much now as they used to. Yeah, I could drive to Raleigh. No, back then the gas prices were also pretty high, so that also kind of negated things. But I could technically go to Best Buy and buy my CDs for maybe $1 or $2 cheaper than I would get them from Bill. However, A, again, the gas prices kind of negated that. But then B, you know, I know that when I buy from Bill, Bill is buying, he's going to the local supermarkets, he's doing this, that, and the other. When I go to Raleigh and spend money and go to Best Buy, you know, first of all, the employees in Best Buy are probably only getting a very small cut of the sales that they are producing at Best Buy. But then that money is definitely not staying in Warren County, but it might not even be staying in Raleigh. That money might be going from that Best Buy location in Raleigh to wherever Best Buy's headquarters are. So having these small town stores, it creates employment opportunities, and it also creates the opportunity for money to stay in the local community. And it's difficult to bring money to this local community that's from the outside. We do have a little bit of tourism in Vance County because we've got a lake. That's one of the things that brings some tourism here. I don't know if Carr Lake has the same type of draw that Lake Gaston would have, which Lake Gaston is more on the Warren County side as opposed to Vance. But we have a very limited tourism, and then also, given that we're on the highway, on the interstate, yes, there are people who stop in Vance County from out of town so that they can go to a fast food restaurant and fill up on gas and things like that. But you don't want to sustain a community on that. You just that's not the goal. So yeah, that's another thing with our small town shops and everything, is to just keep money in our communities, because when there's no incentive for Amazon really to, like, if we're shopping on Amazon, there's no incentive for Amazon to reinvest in Vance County. There just isn't. Now, I could theoretically see if Amazon got the proper tax breaks, I could see Amazon possibly putting some sort of distribution center in Vance. But that would have to go even beyond Vance County. In order for that to happen, state legislators would actually have to create tax breaks for Amazon and say, hey, these are designated counties where we'll give you some tax breaks if you create these jobs in these counties.
Which almost happened.
Okay, and I don't even know what's going on. There's this thing called the Mini Hub, which, for the interest of time, the Mini Hub project was something that people were very excited about 15 years ago, and the interest has kind of gone away. But there was a plan to basically build Research Triangle North in this area, and that kind of fell through. But yeah, we have tried to court businesses with tax breaks, but we need the help of the state legislators to do that. But then also, what happens is when you go to the state level, there are legislators who just frankly have more power than some others. So our legislators in places like the Triangle and Greensboro and Charlotte, they have let's keep it real, they have a little more pull than the people who represent Vance and Warren in the state legislature. So, we're competing with, we might be competing with Charlotte for, something like an Amazon distribution center or something. And I don't think Charlotte has gotten one, but I'm just saying, there are things that the legislators that represent Charlotte and Mecklenburg County can do that our legislators can't do. Part of it, for one thing, is just even better schools, better education opportunities. A lot of these big companies, if they are looking to locate a distribution center or a factory or whatever, they're looking at places where education is very important. And if you can convince people that Wake County schools or Mecklenburg County schools are superior to Vance County schools, which the test scores unfortunately would suggest, even though I would go by more than just the test scores. But then again, yes, I do think that the schools are better in those counties than they are here. And so that's something you have to compete with. Nobody really wants to relocate and have to put their kids in private school, for instance, in order to give them a chance. So there are a lot of different little things that we compete with out in these local areas. So I am going to close it there, just so that we stay under an hour and a half. But your reading is going to be very light this week. So, you have to watch an hour and a half video, but I hope you find it interesting. And you're going to have just very light reading so that you don't have a full, you're not going to have to spend more time this week than usual for this class. So don't worry about that. And just, I hope that one of the things that you can take away from my discussion with Bill and his son here is that this man knows a lot about music. And it's just like, it's the same deal. There's, when I was living in South Carolina, I would go to this barbecue spot in this place called Casey in South Carolina. Yeah, we've got a whole barbecue thing going too.
There's another whole cultural heritage lesson in barbecue right there.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Yeah, and in fact, I might make that one a module as well. But Yeah, when I went to this little barbecue place in Casey, the same way that I can talk to him about music, I could actually talk to the people at that place about the employees at that barbecue spot about food and about the local community, and that's just the sort of thing that you can't. When was the last time you went into McDonald's and you really had a in-depth discussion about food with the person at McDonald's? You don't do that. And you don't have this type of discussion with the person who is selling you a CD at Target. You just don't do it. So that is the cultural heritage angle that we are pursuing here and why small town businesses are important. Your readings are listed in the module as well. Now that you have watched this video, go ahead and do those readings and then respond to the discussion post. And I look forward to giving you a lecture again next week. Same time, same channel. If you have any questions, email me, austinj@missouri.edu. Take care of yourselves. Thank you all.